My name is Savannah Brooks. I was 30 years old the morning my mother turned me into a punchline on Facebook. Not in a private message, not in one of those passive-aggressive family group chats people pretend are jokes. Publicly, loudly, permanently. I was carrying the last two storage bins into my new apartment when my phone started vibrating so hard it nearly slipped out of my hand. I looked down expecting a delivery update or maybe a client note. Instead, I saw a post with my face on it. A smiling photo from moving day, the kind that should have marked the start of a better chapter. The caption above it said, "The 30-year-old leech is finally gone. No more cooking her meals." By the time I read it the second time, the likes had already crossed 1,000. Comments stacked up so fast I could barely keep up. People I hadn't seen in years laughed like they'd been waiting for permission. One relative brought up an old rejection I'd buried. Someone else joked that I was every man's worst nightmare. My sister tagged her friends. My ex liked the post. And the strangest part was that I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I didn't type a single word. I took screenshots of every comment, every laugh, every smug emoji. Then I liked them. All of them. Because 12 days later, the same people who laughed at me would call in the middle of the night, sobbing, begging, apologizing, and asking the same terrified question. "Savannah, what exactly did you do?" Before I tell you what they posted, and what happened 12 days after I walked away, tell me what time it is where you are right now, and where you're watching from. I really want to see how far this story travels tonight. People love mocking work they do not understand. That was the foundation my family built their opinion on. Because I worked from a laptop, because I kept strange hours, because I didn't wear scrubs or heels or a company badge every morning, they decided I was unemployed. My mother had repeated that lie for years until even distant relatives spoke about me like I was a cautionary tale. What none of them knew was that I ran a digital risk and compliance firm from my bedroom. It started small when I was 26, after a local boutique owner paid me to fix the scheduling mess in her online store. Then came a contractor who needed invoicing cleaned up. Then a dental office. Then a regional home supply company that needed help staying compliant before an audit. By 30, I had clients in 4 states, 2 part-time contractors working under my LLC, and enough retained earnings to buy my apartment in cash if I wanted to. I didn't talk about it because I had learned early that success inside my parents' house wasn't celebrated. It was inspected, minimized, and repackaged into something they could still use against me. If I bought something nice, my mother asked who paid for it. If I stayed up late working, my father called it pretend office time. If I landed a major client, my sister rolled her eyes and said, "So, emails?" After a while, silence felt safer than explanation. The ugly truth was that my silence also made their lives easier. My father, Douglas, owned a small plumbing supply business that should have gone under 3 years earlier. He was terrible with digital invoices, payroll software, and tax deadlines. My mother, Patricia, sold handmade decor online and liked telling people she built her shop alone. But I had rebuilt her entire storefront after midnight more times than I could count. I had set up her shipping automations, corrected customer disputes, and quietly answered angry emails under a neutral business alias so she could keep playing local entrepreneur at church luncheons. My younger sister, Haley, was trying to become a lifestyle influencer. I was the one who read the contracts she signed without understanding them, caught clauses that would have trapped her into unpaid brand work, and fixed the website she called her media platform. My aunt had a consignment booth she could barely manage. I'd cleaned up her sales records, too. For years, I was the invisible infrastructure under people who swore I contributed nothing. I didn't live with them because I needed rescuing. I stayed because each time I tried to separate, someone's payment system was about to collapse, Someone's rent check bounced. Someone forgot a filing deadline. Someone cried, and somehow I got pulled back into the mess. My family called it helping out around the house. The truth was uglier. I was subsidizing the illusion that they were more competent, more stable, and more successful than they really were. So when I moved out, I didn't leave dramatically. I left with labeled bins, my standing desk, 3 monitors, a coffee grinder, and a folder on my laptop called Transition. I had spent 6 weeks preparing clean handoffs for everything that actually belonged to me. I moved my own client systems first. Then I separated personal favors from professional services. Then I withdrew my credentials anywhere my name had quietly been holding something together. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I was done being unpaid labor wrapped in family guilt. The morning of the Facebook post, I had already disconnected my backup oversight from 4 different systems. The post didn't create my decision. It confirmed it. That's why I didn't argue in the comments. I already knew something they didn't. They thought I was the embarrassment leaving the house. I was the load-bearing wall. The comments got meaner as the day went on. At first, it was the cheap stuff. Lazy. Moocher. Failure. Future cat lady. Then they started dragging memories out of the grave like trophies. Someone brought up the time I got rejected from a fast food job at 25, which had happened during the worst 6-month stretch of my life after a contract fell through, and I was trying to grab any kind of stable routine to keep from drowning. My Aunt Sharon wrote, "Remember when she cried over that? Still unemployed." 30 people laughed at that one. My sister tagged half her social circle and wrote, "Warning, this is your future dating situation." My ex hit the like button, which somehow felt more pathetic than cruel. And still, I said nothing. I just sat on the floor of my apartment between unopened boxes and collected evidence. My best friend Madison called before noon. "Tell me you did not respond," she said, not even saying hello. I told her I hadn't. She exhaled like I'd just stepped back from a ledge. Madison was one of the only people who knew what my business actually looked like. She had seen the contracts, the balance sheets, the secure folders, the long nights, the calls with attorneys, the systems maps on my wall. She also knew exactly how much of my family's survival depended on work they dismissed as fake. "Savannah," she said carefully, "they have no idea what they just did." "I know," I said. "That's the first funny thing they've said all year." She was quiet for a second, then asked the real question. "Are you going to tell them?" I looked at the post again, at my mother's grinning profile picture beside that sentence, and said, "Not yet." That afternoon, I went line by line through every place where my labor had been blurred into obligation. I revoked device approvals connected to my personal administrator account. I moved recurring vendor reminders off my phone. I archived support templates I had written for my mother's shop. I removed my emergency authorization from the payroll service my father never learned to use properly. Then I drafted a clean, professional notice. It was not emotional. That was the beauty of it. It simply stated that, effective immediately, I would no longer be providing unpaid digital operations, compliance monitoring, invoice management, storefront maintenance, contract review, or emergency administrative support for any individual or business entity not under formal service agreement with Brooks Risk Solutions, LLC. If continued services were desired, they could request a standard contract at market rate, subject to availability. I attached documentation showing the hours I had provided over the past 11 months, broken into categories. The total came to 1,284 hours, unpaid. I did not send it yet. I saved it to drafts and waited. By evening, the post had traveled farther than even my mother probably expected. People from high school were sharing it. 2 old neighbors commented, A former Sunday school teacher reacted with a laughing emoji, then quietly removed it an hour later when she realized I had liked her comment too. That confused people more than anger would have. My calm scared them because humiliation is only fun when the target performs pain on command. I refused. I spent the night building a timeline instead. Day 1, mockery. Day 2, they assume silence means surrender. Day 3, first missed task. Day 5, second missed deadline. Day 7, systems drift. Day 9, visible cracks. Day 12, panic. And yes, I knew exactly when panic would hit because I knew their schedules better than they did. My father had a vendor reconciliation due. My mother had a shipping sync and chargeback window closing. My sister had a sponsorship deliverable with a clause she had not read. My aunt had sales tax exposure from 3 months of sloppy records I'd previously corrected before anyone noticed. I had been the only person catching those things in time. Without me, the errors wouldn't show all at once. They'd compound. That was what people never understand about invisible work. When you do it well, nobody sees the disaster you prevented. They only notice your absence when the first leak becomes a flood. So I kept gathering screenshots, I kept liking comments, and I kept waiting. By the 4th day, my mother's online store started slowing down. I knew because one of her repeat customers accidentally emailed an old support address that forwarded to me for security alerts only. She wrote a polite note asking why 2 orders hadn't shipped and why tracking numbers were missing. I stared at the email and did absolutely nothing. That sounds cold until you understand how many years I had been trained to think every emergency in that house belonged to me. If I had touched that order even once, I would have reopened the entire system. So I closed the email and made dinner in my own kitchen for the first time without listening for someone down the hall shouting my name. Day 5 brought the first crack at my father's business. Douglas had a habit of approving purchases before checking cash flow, then relying on me to move money, correct categorization errors, and reconcile account mismatches before his bookkeeper noticed. He called once that morning and hung up before it rang out, like his pride had jerked him back at the last second. Then he texted, "Need login for invoice thing." I read it. I did not answer. 10 minutes later he sent, "Call me." No please, no acknowledgement, no mention of the Facebook post. The assumption was still there. I existed to restore convenience. I let that message sit beside 30 screenshots of people laughing at my face. By day 6, Heather Collins, the woman who lived 2 buildings down from my parents and knew everybody's business without seeming malicious about it, texted me after seeing the Facebook mess. Heather wasn't cruel. She was observant. "Your mom's been in a mood," she wrote. "Mail carrier couldn't get a signature this morning and she nearly cried." I almost laughed. Patricia only cried in 2 situations: when she was genuinely wounded, or when performance might save her from accountability. I didn't answer Heather either, but I filed it away. That evening, Madison came over with Thai food and a bottle of sparkling water because she knew I worked better with something cold in my hand. We sat among half-unpacked boxes while she read the comments aloud in a fake, dramatic voice until we both started laughing. Then her face changed. "You know, this isn't just about them being mean," she said. "This is about them needing an audience." She was right. My mother hadn't humiliated me privately because private humiliation wouldn't pay the emotional dividend she wanted. She needed likes, agreement, witnesses, proof that the family myth still held Savannah, the burden, Patricia, the long-suffering mother, everyone else, the exhausted survivors of my existence. On day 7, Haley finally texted. Not to apologize, not to ask if I was okay. She wrote, "Can you check a contract real quick?" That was it. No punctuation, no shame. I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. Then I opened the screenshot folder and added her message to it. When people ask why revenge stories satisfy so many viewers, I think this is why. Sometimes cruelty isn't dramatic at first. Sometimes it's casual, efficient, entitled. Haley had helped turn me into entertainment for her friends, then reached for my expertise the second she needed it. I didn't respond. A few hours later, she sent, "Hello?" Then, "Bran needs answer tonight." Then, "Don't be petty." I put my phone face down and went for a walk. That walk changed something in me. The weather was ordinary. The sidewalk was ordinary. Nobody stopped me. Nobody demanded anything. Nobody needed rescuing. For the first time in years, I felt how quiet my own life could be if I stopped volunteering for disrespect disguised as family obligation. When I came back, I found 6 missed calls from home. My mother had finally taken down the original post. But too late. Screenshots were already circulating, and at least a dozen people had saved it. I know because one of them sent it to me with, "Girl, is this real?" I still didn't reply publicly. But that night, at 11:58 p.m., I sent the formal notice from my drafts to every adult who had mocked me, used me, or benefited from pretending I was nothing. Attached to the email were time logs, service categories, and a final line they would read 3 times before believing it. Effective immediately, all prior informal support arrangements are terminated. Any attempt to access, impersonate, or restore my credentials without authorization will be documented. 12 minutes later, my father called twice. My mother called 4 times. Haley sent 3 messages in all caps. I went to sleep. I woke up to 16 missed calls, 19 texts, and 1 voicemail from Aunt Sharon that began with fake sweetness and ended in raw panic. "Savannah, honey, I think there's been some misunderstanding about the sales report setup." Misunderstanding. That word nearly made me laugh out loud in my kitchen. People always call it a misunderstanding when they lose access to the thing they thought they were entitled to. Boundaries become confusion. Consequences become cruelty. And suddenly, the same people who mocked you in public start speaking in soft, trembling voices like they've forgotten exactly how loud they were when they had an audience. My father's messages were the most revealing because Douglas texted exactly like a man who still believed authority could force reality to reverse itself. First came, "Why did you send that?" Then, "You know I need those logins." Then, "Vendor payment didn't go through." Then, 3 hours later, "Call me now." By noon, his tone shifted again. "This is affecting real business." That line sat on my screen like a bad joke, as if what I did had never been real business. As if 1,284 hours of unpaid labor were just little favors sprinkled around the house between washing dishes, disappointing everybody, and existing in the wrong tone. He had spent years acting like my work was imaginary because it came through a laptop and not a storefront with a neon sign. But the second the system started failing, it became real business. Funny how fast people respect labor when they're suddenly the ones drowning without it. My mother took a different route. Patricia moved from anger to wounded innocence with almost professional speed. "After everything I've done for you," came first. Then, "I was joking on Facebook and you know that." Then, "You're embarrassing this family." Then, once she realized that guilt alone wasn't reopening her access, the messages became frantic and stripped down. "Please pick up. Orders are stuck. I don't know what password goes with what. Customers are threatening disputes. Your father is furious. Savannah, please." That last message sat on my phone longer than the others because I had wanted something like that from her for years. Not a dramatic speech. Not a crying confession. Just a single moment where she spoke to me like I was a person instead of a frustration. But now that it had come, it wasn't healing. It was logistical. She did not miss me. She missed what I prevented. Haley's disaster exploded by the afternoon of day 9. She had signed a content deal with a supplement brand that required milestone delivery, exclusivity, performance consistency, and repayment penalties if she failed to post according to schedule. 2 months earlier, I had warned her the contract was trash. I had highlighted the sections that gave the company too much control, explained how the repayment clause could bury her, and even offered to rewrite a cleaner version before she signed. She rolled her eyes, called me dramatic, and said I always acted like I was smarter than everyone. Then, after she signed it anyway, she came back asking me to just make sure it's fine. I did what I could at the time to reduce the risk, but once I stepped away, the deadlines became hers again. Her texts that day told the whole story of who she was when things went wrong. First blame. You knew this was due. Then anger. You are literally doing this to your own sister. Then panic. They're threatening legal. Then collapse. Please help me. I'm serious. Then, 10 minutes later, the text that hit harder than the rest. I can't afford this. I stared at that one the longest because it was the first honest sentence she had written. No performance, no sarcasm, just fear. I didn't enjoy reading it, but I also didn't rush to save her. Consequences always feel cruel to people who've spent their whole lives handing their mess to someone else. The real turn came on day 10, when a local customer posted publicly that my mother's decor shop had taken payment for items that never shipped and stopped responding to email. It was a short post at first, almost polite. Then another woman replied saying she was waiting too. Then someone else added screenshots. Then a fourth person tagged the business page. Within an hour, the thread had become the kind of local drama nobody can look away from. I watched it grow under a community page while Patricia, who had once used Facebook to turn me into a punchline, discovered what public comments feel like when the crowd is no longer laughing with you. At first, people were only complaining about bad service. Then somebody recognized her name. Then somebody connected it to the old post about her leech daughter. Then one comment changed the energy completely. Maybe don't mock the person who was clearly keeping your business alive. I did not write that. I didn't need to. The internet had already picked a side, not because people were noble, but because hypocrisy is the one thing social media loves punishing more than failure. By late afternoon, even people who had laughed at me were going quiet. A woman from church who had reacted with a laughing emoji under my mother's original post suddenly commented on the business thread, praying this gets resolved peacefully. A man who had joked that I should learn to be useful deleted his comment from 12 days earlier. My aunt, who had been so confident when she mocked me in public, sent a voice note so shaky I had to replay it twice. Savannah, sweetheart, if you could just please log in one more time and fix the filing issue, I would appreciate it. I know things got ugly, but we're family. There it was again. Family. The emergency exit word. The magic key people use when accountability starts closing in. Nobody had said family when they were roasting me for entertainment. Nobody had said family when my ex liked that post and left it sitting there for everyone to see. But now, suddenly, blood mattered again. By the evening of day 11, Madison came over and found me sitting cross-legged on my couch, my phone lighting up every few minutes like a warning signal. How bad? She asked. I handed it to her without speaking. She read in silence for nearly a minute, scrolling through texts, missed calls, and voice notes stacking on top of each other like falling shelves. Her face changed slowly, from curiosity to disgust to something colder. They are not calling because they love you, she said quietly. I know, I answered. They're calling because the scaffolding came down. She nodded once. Then don't confuse collapse with remorse. That sentence lodged itself in me like a steel pin, because she was right. It would have been easy to hear their panic and misread it as awakening. Easy to think tears meant truth. Easy to believe that desperation was the same thing as regret. But people cry for many reasons: grief, fear, shame, exposure, financial ruin, the possibility that the person they mocked has finally understood her value. That night, my father finally sent the message that changed the emotional temperature of everything, not because it was kind, because it was honest. We may lose the house. I read it once, then again, then a third time. I knew pieces of that problem already. Months earlier, when Douglas had shoved a spreadsheet at me and told me to just glance at it, I had seen signs of a second mortgage under pressure, inventory being overordered, and cash flow being patched together with denial and timing tricks. I had warned him then. I told him to stop buying like the business was stronger than it was. I told him he was depending too heavily on delayed vendor payments and weak projections. He got offended and told me to stop acting smarter than everybody. Now he was texting me that they might lose the house. Not because I had created a crisis. Because I had stopped disguising one. I still did not answer that night. Instead, I opened the screenshot folder again and laid the first image beside the newest messages. On one side, the 30-year-old leech is finally gone. On the other, please call, we're desperate. On one side, laughing emojis, public humiliation, relatives treating my life like content. On the other, voice notes full of shaking breaths, frantic apologies, and practical terror. I sat there for a long time looking at both versions of them, the confident version and the collapsing version, and realized something important. Nothing had changed about me in those 11 days. Not my intelligence, not my work, not my value. The only thing that changed was that they were finally being forced to live without the parts of me they had spent years pretending did not matter. Day 12 hadn't even started yet. And already they sounded like people standing in the ruins of something they thought would never fall. At 8:14 the next morning, day 12, my phone rang again. This time I answered because I wanted the first full apology, if there was going to be one, spoken out loud. My mother was crying before she even said my name. Real crying, not performance crying. You can hear the difference. One asks to be witnessed. The other is too broken to care who is listening. "Savannah," she said, "please don't hang up." I leaned back against my kitchen counter and said nothing. She rushed into the silence like she was afraid it would harden into a wall. Orders were frozen. Refunds were piling up. Her business page was being flooded with complaints. Dad had missed a payment window with a supplier. Haley's contract issue had escalated into a formal notice. Aunt Sharon owed penalties because records had not been filed correctly. Everybody was blaming everybody. "I just need you to tell us what to do," she whispered. That sentence landed harder than any insult she had ever thrown at me because it revealed the entire lie. The woman who had presented me as a dependent child in front of the internet was now admitting that 4 adults did not know how to function without me. "No," I said quietly. "You need to understand what you did." She started apologizing in fragments. Not graceful. Not polished. Just frantic pieces. She said the Facebook post got out of hand. She said everyone was joking and she didn't think it would spread. She said she was angry that I moved out and wanted people to think she was relieved. She said she never meant for strangers to pile on. She said she didn't know I had done that much. That phrase made my jaw tighten. That much. Like my life had still not earned a full sentence. So I gave her one. I told her exactly what I had been doing for years. I named the systems, the contracts, the alerts, the chargebacks, the filings, the payroll corrections, the fraud flags, the website outages I fixed at 2 a.m., the sponsorship terms Haley ignored, the vendor mismatches Dad never learned to read, the customer disputes I de-escalated under fake support names so Patricia could tell people her business ran itself. I told her that while she was joking online about cooking my meals, I had been preventing her store from being shut down by negligence. While Aunt Sharon joked about a fast food rejection from 5 years earlier, I had protected her from tax exposure 3 separate times. While Haley used me as dating warning content for her friends, I had saved her from signing away 3 months of unpaid work. You made me into a joke, I said, because admitting I was the most competent person in that house would have forced all of you to look at yourselves. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said the words I had wanted since I was about 17 years old. I was wrong. No deflection, no but, no excuse afterward. Just that. It did not fix anything. But it was real. An hour later, my father called and asked if I would meet them in person. His voice sounded older than it had a week earlier. Not wiser. Just stripped. He said the house situation was serious. He said he needed to talk face to face. He did not order. He did not demand. He asked. I agreed to meet them that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, one my family liked because it made them feel modern and successful when they posted from it. I almost laughed at the symmetry. Public image had started this. Public discomfort could finish it. Before I left, Madison asked one question. Are you going there to save them or to be heard? I looked in the mirror, at a face that somehow seemed calmer after 12 days of chaos, and said, to be heard. Good, she replied. Then don't leave with a new unpaid job. They were already seated when I walked in. My father looked like he had not slept. My mother had makeup on, but badly applied. The kind people wear when they want to hide crying and only make it more obvious. Haley sat stiff-backed with swollen eyes and a legal envelope half hidden under her hand. For once, nobody performed normal. Nobody smiled too brightly. Nobody tried to joke the tension away. The table looked like what it really was, a family standing in the rubble of a lie. I sat down and put my phone on the table, screen face down, not to threaten them, to remind myself I would not be manipulated by tears alone. My father spoke first. We handled this wrong. That was as close to humility as Douglas Brooks had probably come in 20 years. I let him keep going. He admitted he had relied on me far more than he ever acknowledged. He admitted he did not understand most of the systems I managed and had resented needing help he couldn't control. He admitted that after I moved out, he missed a vendor deadline, then another, and the cash shortage he had been hiding became impossible to cover. He said if things kept sliding, they could default on the house within weeks. Then my mother did something I genuinely hadn't expected. She took out her phone, opened Facebook in front of me, and showed me a drafted public apology. Not posted yet. Waiting. It named the original post. It admitted it was cruel. It admitted her daughter had been mocked publicly and that she had participated. It did not mention money, businesses, or passwords. It centered the humiliation. I wanted you to see it first, she said. I read it slowly. It was imperfect, but it was better than I expected. Haley started crying before I finished. She said the brand that had threatened her wanted repayment plus damages if she kept missing deliverables. She said she knew I had warned her. She said she only tagged her friends because she thought it would get laughs and make her look witty. I didn't think of you as a real person in that moment, she whispered. That hurt more than almost anything else. Maybe because it was so cleanly honest. Not a sister, not a daughter, not a woman building a life. Just content. I could have stood up then and left. A lot of viewers probably wish I had. But revenge that actually changes your life is not always about the sharpest exit line. Sometimes it is about forcing the truth to sit in the middle of the table until nobody can look away. So I told them what the next part would be. I said I was not moving back. I was not restoring unpaid access. I was not fixing everything out of guilt by midnight. If they wanted my professional help, they would sign contracts, pay retainers, accept boundaries, and communicate through proper channels like any other client. Family did not mean permanent access to my labor. Love did not mean public humiliation followed by private extraction. Respect was no longer optional. It was the price of being in my life at all. My father nodded first, which shocked me. Then he asked what the retainer would be. Not with sarcasm, with defeat. I gave him the number. He looked physically ill, which was almost funny when I considered how freely he had spent my time for years. My mother asked if there was anything they could do besides pay me. Yes, I said. Tell the truth. Publicly. The same way you lied. She posted the apology right there. My sister posted one too. Shorter, but direct. My aunt called while we sat there because she had heard what was happening, and for the first time in her life, my mother put her on speaker and said, "You're apologizing to Savannah, not me." I listened as a grown woman twice my age stumbled over basic accountability and finally managed it. Did that erase what they had done? No. Did it satisfy something in me to watch the comments under my mother's apology shift from gossip to criticism of her behavior? Absolutely. Some people defended her. Some said family matters should stay private, which was rich, considering nobody objected when my humiliation was public entertainment. But enough people saw it, enough understood, enough knew who had really been carrying whom. That mattered. Over the next week, the missed calls stopped sounding desperate and started sounding careful. Contracts were sent, 2 were signed, 1 was not. I took my father on as a limited-term client under strict scope because his mess affected the roof over Haley's head, and despite everything, I wasn't interested in watching disaster consume people just because it could. I refused my mother's store unless she hired a real fulfillment assistant and let me build boundaries that couldn't be bulldozed by guilt. Haley asked for help negotiating her contract mess, and I referred her to an attorney instead of rescuing her myself. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and one of the healthiest. People do not grow when you keep cushioning the consequence of their contempt. As for me, I went home to my apartment that evening, opened the screenshots folder, and moved it into an archive labeled Lessons. I didn't delete it. Healing and forgetting are not the same thing. I stood in my own quiet kitchen, poured a glass of water, and realized nobody in the world was entitled to call me a burden again. Not because I had proven my worth through money, not because they finally saw my usefulness, but because I had finally stopped handing other people the authority to define me. If there's a lesson in this story, it's this. The people who laugh the loudest at your life are sometimes the ones standing on work you did in silence. Never confuse invisibility with uselessness. Never let cruelty dressed up as family humor tell you what your value is. Self-respect is not loud in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like screenshots, silence, and 12 days of letting the truth arrive on schedule. But once you choose it, everything changes. And the people who thought they could shame you forever usually discover the most expensive loss of all is not money, not reputation, not even a house. It is losing access to someone who loved them enough to hold everything together while they were busy calling her a joke.